Now, this is where the data, where you present some other data that's very important. So overall, what 1% of the population, right,
Less than 1%. It's like 0.6.
is involved in the transgender with issues of trans
Right.
right, identified transgender. Okay. Now here's the key statistic, Corey. What percentage of individuals that identify as transgender go on to suicide?
So 40% attempt suicide.
No, one more time. 40%.
40%.
40.
40%.
40.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And in the one report I was reading, and this was, I have it all linked in here, they were showing that more of that percentage happens after transition surgery. So let me just throw some really important statistics out. We've got over 15 states right now, I believe, that have Medicaid that are providing an array of legislation, anywhere from covering puberty blockers to full-on transition surgery to, breast augmentation. So you have people out there who can't get on hormones or who can't get a hysterectomy because they're suffering pain or whatever the reasons are, and their doctors won't approve it or they can't get insurance, but Medicaid will cover breast augmentation for men. Mm-hmm. Isn't that interesting? Mm-hmm. Because they use discrimination. They built up discrimination in their social engineering so they can use that as a legal, for legal reasons in order to pass legislation. We've got 4 states right now that have already passed legislation where it is now mandatory that LGBT be taught in schools, even though it's already being taught in multiple schools. And I have a video in here that shows they are literally teaching young children, we're talking K through 12 here. So they're teaching young children that genitals do not determine your sex. And you may feel like a boy one day and a girl another day, and they're making it seem like it's a choice. And they are confusing children. And they've got these groups out there that are going around and meeting with and training judges, CPS, teachers, counselors, shrinks, doctors, that this is how you handle it. This is the approach. And then if they, you determine they have gender dysphoria, this is how you get the parents involved, because you need to get the parents involved in order to get on puberty blockers. So, there's books out there, young kids books for like first graders about how to talk to your parents about getting on puberty blockers. This is in every institution. It has been completely infiltrated through every, from medical facilities to universities to schools, you name it. They've got the media backing. The puberty blockers, the number one seller of that is AbbVie, which branched off from Abbott Laboratories. Now, they sell the Lupron puberty blockers, and their Lupron has three variations. They have it for endometriosis, prostate cancer, and puberty blockers. So there's 25,000 adverse reports on this already, including 1,500 deaths. In 2016, the FDA, and I have that in here, the screenshot and the link to it, the FDA ordered not just AbbVie, but all of the others that were selling the puberty blockers, that they have to include that they cause seizures and serious psychiatric issues. So,
yet, as you mentioned, that in some instances they say, hell, you can be on these hormones and you don't need to get any type of mental health,
right,
of counseling, evaluation, anything like that.
Right. And this is the problem. So what you have is you've got like the Endocrine Society and all these medical associations and organizations that everyone points to as the Bible for the health industry. You're a doctor, so you understand. You've got these high levels. They're the ones that say, this is how you carry this out. This is how you determine diagnosis, da-da-da-da-da. So they created, I think it was back in 2011. Don't hold me to that. It's in my timeline. They basically created the guidelines, the book on how to handle what was gender identity disorder. They took the word disorder out and then decided to call it gender dysphoria. It is still a medical condition. So they basically document and say, this is how you should handle it. And in there, they're saying children should be given puberty blockers. So that just gave the authority, forget about any other oversight, forget about the FDA, that just gave authority to everyone in the medical profession to handle it in that manner that they are being told to handle it in, which we know is all infiltrated and controlled. And
then, as you point out in your article, Corey, if parents say, no, this is not for my kid, right? Mm-hmm. Well, enter Child Protective Services, right? And the Gestapo.
Right. So what we have is this has happened in a couple of cases, and this is something that they're pushing. They tried pushing legislation through recently in, I can't remember if it was South Dakota or North Dakota, where it would have given parents, it would have protected parents and given them their rights that should automatically be their rights to determine whether their child, see a therapist or go on puberty blockers or anything pertaining to altering themselves, into another gender. It would have given them legal authority of that, and it was killed. And so what's happening is it's opening them up to medical neglect. So if you've got areas, you have schools where the counselors are talking to the children and the children suddenly feel confused, and gosh, I can't imagine why with all the indoctrination going on. And the counselor, is very suggestive and has this kid convinced that, oh, maybe I should be a different gender. Maybe I'm not just a tomboy and I'm going to grow out of this. Maybe I should actually convert and be a different gender because after all, this is a choice now. So now if the parents, refuse to do anything or recognize that and refuse to put their kids on puberty blockers, they're trying to say, well, we're going to send CPS over for medical neglect. Mm-hmm. So, we're reaching very dangerous territory here where this is already starting to happen. So that's why this is so important because, listen, there's a Dr. Paul McHugh. He's a distinguished professor of psychiatry and behavioral sciences at Johns Hopkins University. He recently just said this. He said, and I have the longer quote, but here's the short one. Many people are doing what amounts to an experiment on these young people without telling them it's an experiment. You need evidence for that, and this is a very serious treatment. It is comparable to doing frontal lobotomies. I believe it will be something like how we think of eugenics now. We will come to regret it when we discover how many of the young people that were injured regret it themselves. Because the problem is, with the puberty blockers, they've never done a long-term study on the effects. And they're dishing these out like candy.
Mm-hmm. And Corey, this is a recurrent theme when it comes to many of these medications.
Yeah.
Right? And you mentioned vaccines.
Yeah.
Right? It's a similar thread you find.
Right. Yeah, I did a whole report on eugenics and I did a whole report on vaccines because it's never really changed. The eugenicists basically just changed their terminology and their language to genetics and biotechnology and bioengineering and this and that. But they're still doing the same thing. You still have the same people who are on boards of population control councils and that are all about population control. And we know how Bill Gates feels about that.
All right.
Bill Gates, what's that?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. And so it's, the whole thing, the whole pharmaceutical industry, the WHO, the World Health Organization, all of it, as far as I'm concerned, all of it is corrupt, and in some areas it almost seems like it started out good and then it was hijacked along the way by these people. And in other areas, you can clearly see, no, it began this way.
Right. It didn't even start out good. It was all an ulterior motive for something that's not for the benefit of the individual, let alone society.
Right. Exactly.
So Corey, what's their end game here?
So the end game is to create massive identity confusion, to create they've already, they're partially successful and they're heading towards full success with the whole third gender. In India in 2014, they made it legal that a third gender exists now. So yeah, they're doing that here. They've already got multiple states that have created Gender X, birth certificates, state IDs, driver's license, medical forms. You see it all the time now.
Yeah.
It'll say male, female, other. Or, so it's a mind game. It's mind manipulation. Look, they're not going to put this much time and money and investment into an industry, into something where there's less than 1% of the population, unless this is an industry they have a hold of that they feel they can leverage and they can build upon and they can profit from. Because these people, no matter what their gender, are all about the money as well. So they eventually will create, heading towards creating this one world governance. And by creating all this mass confusion and chaos and creating a melting pot of confused individuals, for their 2030 agenda, while at the same time making millions and millions and millions, billions of dollars on this industry, from the hormones to the which is a lifetime thing, to the blood tests, to transition surgeries, which I anticipate Planned Parenthood eventually expanding wings to do actual transition surgeries. I could see that coming down the pike. And the interesting thing is, if you look at the funders and the profiteers, they're almost one and the same in most cases, because those that are funding the agenda, and people will recognize the names, they get themselves in on boards everywhere, universities, big pharma, they work with the legislators, and they invest in the medical infrastructure so they get a return on their money at the same time. And there's other very interesting connections here with the money, like Abbott Laboratories in 2015 donated between $50,000 and $100,000 to the Clinton Foundation. Imagine that. Now, Takeda Pharmaceutical Company, who teamed with Abbott Laboratories to create the first puberty blockers, they were the second. The first was the Salk Institute. This one's which was Supprelin, called Supprelin. So the Lupron was created by Abbott Laboratories, Takeda Pharmaceuticals, and then AbbVie branched off from that. But they are now known as the number one provider. So in 2016, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation granted Takeda Pharmaceutical Company over $40 million. Now that has to do with the vaccine. Nonetheless, I'm just showing these people all work together.
Right.
In 2016, AbbVie contributed $44,538 to Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign. And AbbVie's also was a CGI partner, Clinton Global Initiative. They've teamed up with them on several projects. AbbVie's teamed up with Google. They're working with Google right now with their little secretive Calico LLC biotech company. So the point is, it's the same patterns. I see the same circles of people, the same patterns over and over. And this is not just happening here. This is happening on a global scale.
Well, and then, Corey, as you point out, add the intel agencies into this, right? The diversity and inclusion strategy by who authored that? John Brennan, right? He was the one pushing for that.
Right.
Through the CIA.
Yep, absolutely. The CIA is involved, and it's crazy. I mean, I have so much packed in here. It's a 64-page report, and I have links to everything. I also have it in PDF format for download in the bookshop for anyone who wants to, print it out or have it archived. But yeah, it's really, I mean, when you go in and you look at this and you can clearly see this full agenda that started in the 1950s. And I've got plenty of examples in here to show how this carried out, and a lot of proof in here. And it's really alarming. I mean, you've got, this is how crazy it is. So the ACLU, they just tweeted this a couple weeks ago. There's no way to be a man. Men who get their periods are men. Men who get pregnant and give birth are men. Trans and non-binary men belong. Okay. This is what they're pushing. And like I said, this is global. This is how you demoralize a country and take it down to its knees. We are in
This is how you bring about tyranny.
Yes, we are in my opinion, from everything I've researched, we are in the final stages of them attempting to bring this country to its knees.
Corey, do you see there's a way to unwind any of this, or is it a done deal?
I think there's a way to unwind some of it. I think they're going to keep coming at this. People are going to be fighting certain fronts while they're going to keep trying to push through legislation on other fronts. And if people don't pay attention in their local areas to what is happening in their schools, because children are the big targets of all these agendas.
That's right.
And with their state legislation, and they don't band together and they don't email out everyone who goes to their children's school and, group together to try and fight some of this stuff. It's tough. It's tough, trying to come up with solutions and ways of fighting some of this. And I don't know. What do you think?
Well, here's what I think. And I've learned this from, it sounds very cynical, 31 years of doing policy stuff through Washington.
Yeah.
The single most effective way to end bad policy is to cut the gravy train that's driving the policy. Take the money away, the funding. Single most effective way, and the most expedient way, if you will, of cutting out programs that are actually harming the public and the country is to see who's funding those policies and then find a way to cut the funding chain. And you can try to and you have to put information out for folks and try to rationalize with folks. But let's face it, Corey, look at this issue you just pointed out. With folks that go through this, the transgender reassignment, if you will, it's a big hormonal hit on the system. And you identified the fact that 40% of these folks that are involved in the transgender identity issues and the like that go through this change, or at least try to commit suicide.
Right.
So one of the side benefits, if you will, and I use that term loosely on behalf of the globalists, one of the benefits that they see is that people aren't thinking rationally about issues, and that plays in their hands.
Right.
So the problem here is that I can, our listeners can try to educate as many people as possible.
Right.
But if part of our audience, and it's not just on the hormonal stuff, if you look at what the pharmaceutical industry, I take a lot of heat because I have a series I do every other week with Dr. Peter Glidden, one of the top nutrition guys in the world, okay, who our focus is on getting people off all pharmaceutical grade products, okay?
Right.
Because you could address many issues, not all, but many issues from a nutritional standpoint.
Right.
Okay. Get a lot of heat for that series.
I bet.
Okay, huge.
I'm with you on it, though.
Right, I know. Right. And anyone who's looking for long-term benefit of themselves and their family should be for it. And it's not the general public we get a lot of blowback from. It's from the big dudes, right?
Right.
Deep state dudes, pharmaceutical industry, insurance industry, medical industrial complex side, Who
are all protected by the government. Yes.
Exactly. And we get blowback from people within government too, right? Because it affects their donations.
Right.
Right?
Absolutely.
Okay. So it's not just with the hormone stuff. If you look at all aspects of the medical industrial complex and the pharmaceutical industry, there are all these adverse sides to this, to these medications and the like that they don't want you to talk about.
Right.
And this is why I have found that when it comes to really bad policy that is adversely affecting the country, the public, the future of the country, the single most effective way, and I 30 years ago, I was like, oh, no. We can just, okay, identify the problem and rationalize with people and put out a huge amount of information. So,
right.
No. I mean, that's important, and you got to do that.
Right.
But the single most effective way is you got to go for the jugular on the deep state dweebs that are putting the public in harm's way.
And we need to kill the friggin' funding to all the NGOs that make the world go around.
Right.
And they really should set in place a law where pharmaceutical companies are not even allowed to donate to campaigns.
I agree with you. And these NGOs are just a cover, right?
They are.
Cover for the bad guys doing stuff.
Yeah, almost.
And putting the public in harm's way.
Yeah.
So when I look at an issue and you say, well, what would you do? I would look at who are the big funders of this stuff. And I try to cut that gravy train.
Right.
That's where I'd go.
Right.
That's where I'd go. Because here's the bottom line. There have to be a series of long-term studies done, short, medium, long-term studies done, on the ramifications this is having on people.
Mm-hmm.
And here's the bottom line. 40% of people that go through this try to commit suicide or commit suicide, right?
Right.
Okay. Now, I think that's terrible. You think that's terrible. Our listeners think that statistic's terrible. But you know what? The Bill Gates of the world, the Warren Buffetts of the world, the deep state dweebs of the world, they go, perfect.
Yeah, exactly.
We get all their money for an X period of time. And they refer to us, as you know, Corey, and I've been in rooms in Washington where the term useless eater is used. Okay? Wow. Corey, when it's all said and done, and this is part of that whole eugenics thing that people say is conspiracy theory. Mm-hmm. They take your money. They make you a potential zombie in the process.
Right.
And then you, the useless eater, kill yourself.
Right.
And you know what? That's horribly tragic in our world. But you know what? In their world, they think that's perfect.
That's a plus. That's a bonus.
Absolutely. Because guess what? We get rid of another useless eater after we've stripped money out of the system and out of taxpayers and out of, whatever. And, perfect. Let's move on. Melinda, let's go for ice cream.
Right. And then if they sterilize you instead, well, that's a bonus because you're never going to have kids. So, it's sick. It's really sick. And I feel bad for the transgender community because they've been completely exploited and used.
Yeah, they have been. And because people will hear this conversation goes, well, you two and everybody that agrees with you are you despise folks that are transgender.
Right.
No.
We're transphobes or bigots. It's not about them. This whole report is about how they're being exploited and used.
Right.
And taken advantage of. It's disgusting.
And you know what? My background, it was not only as an orthopedic surgeon, but as a specialist in prevention-related issues. In particular, preventing injury, preventing harm.
Right.
Well, the way the system is now, it's harmful.
Oh, yeah.
And many people are being abused by it.
Yep. It's awful. It's awful. That's why it's so important that this information gets out, because in the meantime, while we are hoping that they will cut funding and do the things you're talking about, people need to be aware of this so that they know what's going on in their schools. I recently did a report called Turn the Page or Lose Your Children to Indoctrination, and that one's just specific to the books that are being read to the children in classrooms or in the libraries, or they're taken home and it's part of their homework. There's fear-mongering, there's massive indoctrination, there's everything is like one-sided. What they want you to know, what they want to seed your brains with, your children's brains with, is all they're going to hear. They don't get to expand. They don't get to explore. They don't get to see both sides of anything.
Right. And that's the key.
And teachers themselves will tell you this, unless they're completely brainwashed themselves. But, they have to follow the curriculum. So
well, and I tell you, when I retired, many teachers that were my patients said, "I know why you're retiring." And it's the same reason why I'm going to retire early, because I can't teach the way I want to teach. Right. And I can't use the materials I want to use. And I believe I'm actually doing the students a disservice by being the individual that's funneling this information to them that I know is not going to help them and could well hurt them. Right.
And, the other thing about this with the teaching, I did a follow-up article about homeschooling, because I've seen that a lot of people are pulling their kids out. We haven't, I was looking at the statistics and seeing the increase in homeschooling, and that's great. And then I thought, oh boy, I better look at legislation, because they're not going to like this. They won't be able to program your kids if they're being homeschooled. So sure enough, I look into that. And whereas these bills were killed, make no mistake, these people are not going to stop at trying to alter the wording or slip it into another bill somewhere else, because we know that game, how they do that. What they were trying to do in a few states is pass legislation that would basically stated that if parents were going to homeschool, they were going to send CPS to their home, in their home, to talk to and observe their child to make sure there is no abuse or neglect going on. Okay, so we already know how corrupt the CPS system is. Our own State Department included that in the Trafficking in Human Persons report this year about the whole foster care system being a big proponent of child trafficking. So we know how corrupt it is. I mean, could you imagine if something like that, if a law like that ever passed, to where now they're going to come into your home just because you want to homeschool your child? So I'm alerting people to pay attention to that too, because that's another thing on their agenda that they're pushing for down the pike.
Corey, I'd like to thank you for everything you have done, are doing, and will do. You are beyond a beacon. You're an entire lighthouse of truth. No, you really are. You shine this huge beacon of light on issues that the deep state, their tentacle, the bought-off lamestream fake media, will never touch, and the deep state wants hidden. Yeah. And I know you get a lot of heat for doing that, but I thank you for doing that. Well, because the only way we can address issues is by shining the light of truth on it. And, that's right. and encouraging folks to research more and to get more information. Now, how can they get more information on what you do and how you do it, and how can they support you?
So my website is coreysdigs.com. It's COREYSDIGS.com. I'm also on Twitter and YouTube. I do a weekly podcast with the wonderful speaker and the Sharp Edge, which comes out every Friday, and you can find that on my YouTube. And I believe we're on Stitcher and SoundCloud as well. And they can support me on Patreon. I could definitely use some support to keep this work going. I don't think people understand how costly all the expenses involved in running websites and all of this.
I think you're right. They really don't. I mean, and it gets a little frustrating sometimes. I know you get it too. Well, you should do this for free.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. So like for my reports example, all the information I dig up is for free. It is out there. I have all my investigative reports on my website. I also provide well over 80 resources and tools and background search databases and everything, declassified documents on my site. And then what I did is I created the bookshop. It's like a small fee if you want to download my investigative reports in PDF format, so you have them, because I had a lot of people asking me, because my reports are really long.
Yeah, and they're very thorough. No, they are. But there are huge costs with having a site like yours, like mine. The security costs are enormous.
Yeah.
I mean, enormous. And getting larger every day, because as you know, and And I know there are sites where their costs aren't that high, and that's because they're not taking on the deep state on a daily basis, let alone minute by minute basis, like what you do and I do and a number of the people that we know and respect do.
Oh yeah, in fact, it's funny, when I put out my Exploiting Transgenders report, my cybersecurity guy texted me and said, "What have you done?" Like, I just blocked whatever. It was like well over 100,000 attacks in like 60 seconds. And I started laughing. I said, "Yeah, I'm striking a nerve with this one."
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah.
So Corey's, Coreys, digs.com.
Yes.
The name of your YouTube channel.
Corey's Digs.
Same, Coreys, digs.
DIGS, yep, 2 words. And then same for my Twitter handle.
Same on your Twitter handle. Very good.
Yep.
Corey, I'd like to thank you again for everything you have done, are doing, and will do. I'd like to thank you folks for joining us today as we end every segment. Dream big and dare to fail. Thank you for your time today.